You want to bet? Bet on what?
I'll take that bet. Right on.
Welcome back, everyone. My name is Matthias. Welcome to episode 4 of Wanna Bet. Today is Wednesday, September 4th. It's about 8:54 p.m., so these lines should be fairly consistent between now and Saturday. You can always expect a little bit of line movement, especially if there's a quarterback that gets injured and doesn't play. That's when you tend to see that. As far as sharp money coming in, I don't expect these lines to change dramatically. I think you've seen most of that happen so far. I'm going to go through one of the systems that I use. It's a combination of a few things, one of which was a stability score, and I'm going to post pictures of what that tool basically does. It takes universities that have, whether it's a lost starting quarterback or a few key players on their offensive line or talented receiver, running back, head coach, all that stuff. And basically the first 4 weeks of the season, so week 0 through week 3, teams that have a lot of turnover and they have new structure to their program tend to be opportunities to fade them in the first coming up weeks. I think in the past couple years that this system has been played, it hits at like a 57% against the spread rate, which is huge. But I like to take those numbers as far as stability scores, and then I see what's been posted as far as the opening numbers go. And then I try and find where have I gained value with those first posted numbers. If I can grab a half point or a point or maybe a little bit less juice paid, that's where I weed through all those, because there's usually like 14, 15 a week. I'll probably bet 8 to 10 of them, depending on where I can find some good pricing. So that's kind of what I do. I'm going to run through those real quick. If you want to go and run these stability scores by yourself, I'll put a link down below as far as where you can go to sign up to look at that stuff. And then from there on out, you kind of just have to have your own handicapping system, which can be a correlation of a few different things. So I'm going to run through what my card is as far as edge that I've gained plus stability scores for this week. P.S. A lot of these are not flashy matchups, so these aren't ones you're probably going to sit down and get very invested in. I'm going to talk about 4 games after I wrap this up, which I would call, all eyes on these games throughout the weekend, because we do have some really good matchups. So I'm going to run through this real quickly, and then we'll go through some of these marquee matchups coming up. Okay, first and foremost, we have Eastern Michigan getting 25.5 points versus Washington, Georgia Tech laying 2.5 versus Syracuse, Oklahoma State laying 7.5 versus Arkansas, Liberty laying 21.5 versus New Mexico State, Ole Miss laying 41 versus Mid-Tennessee State, Maryland laying 8.5 versus Michigan State, UAB laying 12.5 versus Louisiana Monroe, University of South Florida getting 31 points versus Alabama, and then Louisville minus 28 versus Jacksonville State. So those are ones where I found good stability scores and then an edge in the market. Perfect example, Maryland versus Michigan State. Maryland looked really good last weekend. Michigan State did not. This game opened up at 10, and I think some places still have it at 9, 9.5 as far as Maryland goes. So when I can get that minus 8.5, that's a very, very easy bet. It's almost an automatic pick. We've done our homework. You know the teams that you like going into things. And then from there on out, it's just watching and waiting and trying to pull that value out wherever you can. So those are the plays we have from that system in college football. Have a few more bets, and I'll probably add a few more before Saturday. So be sure to follow us on Twitter and Juice Reel as well. That way you can get up-to-date info if we do add something late. If we see something crazy happen in the market where we have sometimes these books do make mistakes. I mean, last week when I was looking through, I was trying to get the Florida Gators +3. MGM had it flash where it was Miami +3. So I absolutely hammered it. So sometimes these books do glitch. I mean, anytime you're using an app, mistakes are going to happen. So we'll keep an eye on that. Be sure to follow us so you can keep up to date with everything. We're going to go through some of the marquee games that I think a lot of viewership will be played. I only have currently 2 bets placed on these, and it's both from the same game. So I'm going to go through what the spread is, the over-under, a little bit of a summary from what we learned last week with these teams playing, and then the handicap number I have, and then you can choose to do more research and make your own bets. Maybe you have in your mind the picks you want to make, and this just solidifies them. If that's the case, great. So I don't have big plays on these except for two. I will note the ones I do have wagers on, and that could change come Saturday. But I think these are just games that are going to be fun to sit down and watch. And if you want to, if you're recreationally betting, then these would be great to just, oh, hey, there's a small advantage there handicapping. I'm going to watch the game. I want to have some vested interest. I'm going to throw $20 on it. Whatever. Perfect. Okay, first up on the marquee games, we have Texas going up to Ann Arbor, Michigan. Major miss. This game opened up Texas laying 3. Had I been on top of things, I would have hammered that. This would have been my biggest bet of the weekend if I could have gotten that 3. I think Texas goes up there and plays very well and wins this game. Now it's gotten bet up. Texas is laying 7. Michigan's getting 7.5. The over/under is 42. Last weekend, Michigan really did not look that impressive at all versus Fresno State. Some people may say that they were kind of looking ahead to this Texas matchup. You know, you lost your quarterback to the NFL draft. You lost your head coach that brought you a national championship to the NFL. So Michigan's still figuring some stuff out. They had 121 yards in the air, 148 yards on the ground. And really, Fresno State could have won that game. They had very, very poor decision making by their quarterback on that final drive. They had bad penalties that negated them to continue the game. They threw a couple interceptions that got called back from Michigan penalties. And then finally, it did expire with Michigan picking it off and running the clock out. If you're wanting to bet Texas, I kind of feel like you missed it. You definitely missed the best number. If you think they're going to go in there and win by 8 points, maybe you lay the 7. But I think right now, if you're going to take one of these teams, Michigan at 7.5 is the route that I would lean. The number one bet I'd make on this, that over under 42.5, I think that's a pretty good call. You know, Michigan's got a really good defense. We don't know a whole lot. Texas Texas destroyed Colorado State last week, and you didn't learn a whole lot. I don't think Colorado State's a pushover team by any means. I think they're on the rise as far as their recruiting process goes. You know, last year, that game in Boulder, Colorado, I think gave them some notoriety as far as us against the world mentality. So I don't think they're a pushover program, but what I like to see early in the year is great teams beating up inferior teams. Texas did that. Michigan did not. I'm kind of contradicting myself, but this game handicaps out Texas -4. So Michigan plus 7.5 maybe is where I would lean. But as far as if I were to put anything on this game, it'd be the under 42.5 point total. Up next, Colorado going to Nebraska. Colorado is getting 7 points. I can't really find anything changed. This has been pretty consistent. I think this opened up at 7.5 last Sunday. So that stayed pretty consistent. Nebraska, their defense is top notch. They allowed 18.3 points per game last season. They have 8 starters from last season returning this year. So I really like Nebraska's defense. Their quarterback, what is his name? Dylan Raiola, Patrick Mahomes' doppelganger, looked good last week. They beat the crap out of UTEP. Again, I like seeing that. If there's a team you should be beating into the ground, it's good to just solidify that early on. So Colorado did not do that. North Dakota State, although a top contending FCS team every single season, they are still a Division I AA school. So as far as recruiting talent goes, especially on the offensive and defensive lines, Colorado should have been able to run the ball a lot better than they did. The run game did not get going at all last week. It was, Shadora Sanders just airing it out to Travis Hunter and wide open receivers. So poor coverage by NDSU. And honestly, North Dakota State should have won that game. They were getting 11 points. They did cover. But, there was some very, very weird officiating there late. And I think Colorado squeaked by in not deserving so. So I don't know with this one. The over-under is 58.5. My lean right now would be bet that under. Nebraska's got a good defense, and Nebraska is going to want to run the ball and ground and pound. Colorado's going to score some points. They're going to air it out, and they're going to get a few here and there. But 58.5 is a pretty good amount. So if I were betting this one, I would bet the under. This one handicapped out to Nebraska 4.5. So Colorado getting 7 points seems to be a safe bet with a rivalry game such as this, but that is a hostile environment. So, take that with a grain of salt. Should be a good game though. Up next, we have Tennessee going to NC State. Tennessee currently 7.5-point favorite. You can find NC State +8, over under 60.5. You can also find 61.5 for the under. Tennessee absolutely rocked Chattanooga last week. They had almost 700 yards offense, 45-point game at halftime. So they kind of took their foot off the gas. They ended up winning 69-3. So that's a perfect example of, great teams just beating up someone inferior. I love seeing that. And then on the flip side, you had NC State barely squeak out a win versus Western Carolina. If anyone watched that game, the first half was a 3-point game. I think Western Carolina was winning at halftime. And it just kept seeming like NC State was spinning their wheels in the mud the entire game. And this is a top 20 team entering the season. So I don't like seeing that. They did score 3 unanswered touchdowns in the fourth quarter to end up winning that game. But all in all, this is a matchup where I think there's a little bit of underappreciation for how good Tennessee is as a football team. That 7.5-point total, I would be in favor of laying that. I think this handicaps out for me at Tennessee -11. So, 3.5-point, 4-point margin there. I think that's a pretty safe bet. As far as the over-under goes, over 60.5. If I were betting, I would put the over as far as that goes. Two teams that should have some offensive firepower. I expect Tennessee to go up early, which would bode well for the over. We would love, second quarter and fourth quarter are historically always highest scoring. As you're getting up to that half, teams will take a few extra risks and chances because they know that they're either going to be going into the locker room or the game's going to expire. So you tend to see some fireworks towards the second and fourth quarter. I don't expect anything less with this game. I think it's going to be big points on the scoreboard. Over 60.5, and then also lay the 7.5 with Tennessee. I think those are good bets. The final game, which I do have 2 wagers on, Oregon hosting the Boise State Broncos. So Oregon, I know this seems a little bit crazy because Oregon should have whooped up on Idaho last weekend. They ended up barely winning that game. Game opened up Oregon -22.5. It got bet to Oregon -19. You can also find Boise +20 right now. The over-under is set to 61. That place is going to be rocking. Boise State's going to go into Oregon, and they're going to be ready to kind of prove that they deserve to be in that top 3, top 4 team in the entire country. And they definitely have ambitions of going to the college football playoffs and winning a national championship this year. That Idaho game was weird because Oregon did play pretty dang well. They had 380 yards in the air, another 100 on the ground, only scored 24 points. So that doesn't really match up with what I would expect to see the final score as far as those yardages. Their quarterback played very well. Dan Lanning, Oregon's head coach, made some questionable decisions as far as electing to not kick field goals and just poor decision making when they were getting into the red zone. So I like Oregon a lot. Boise State allowed 45 points from Georgia Southern last weekend. They did win the game, had 371 yards on the ground. Their running back, Ashton Teente, had 6 touchdowns. So I think he's already gotten a little bit of talk for Heisman talk. So Boise State, ground and pound, that's great. But Idaho only had 49 rushing yards last week. I'm not comparing Boise State to Idaho being apples to apples as far as talent goes, but Oregon's got a good defense. They have a really good offense. This one handicaps out for me, Oregon -22.5 still. So Oregon laying 19 is a bet that I did take. I also took the over 61. Similar thought process to the Tennessee and NC State game. I expect fireworks early and often. This game could be buttoned up to 50, 60 points at halftime if it plays out as I expect it to. 2 teams with a lot of offensive firepower, 2 teams that have a lot to prove from their mishaps last week. So both teams should come out swinging. My favorite bets on this card right now are Oregon -19 and then over 61. So those are the kind of marquee matchups as well as the card I had from last weekend. We did go 12-6 against the spread so far this season. So our strategy is working out very well. The deeper you go into the college football season, or any season really, you start to learn a little bit more tendencies from teams. So you're throwing darts at the board a little bit. You're going off of assumption to start the season. So you have to have a pretty good, standard as far as how you handicap these games out. Not as intriguing of matchups as last weekend, but there are some pretty good ones on the board. Those are my favorite plays for this week. So go through and do some research yourself on these 4 games and the advice we've given out here. And then if you want to go through my card for that stability score plus some edge, those numbers are probably gone. I bet those early. And whenever I see a half a point here or there, I take it immediately. So all those numbers that I mentioned initially, they may be gone. If you can still get them or get a number better, I would definitely say that those are going to be some really good plays this week. So I'll post the full card right here somewhere. If we add some, once again, follow us on Twitter and Juice Reel, and we'll keep up to date with everything. I'll be in Chicago this weekend, so we're going to be going to the Bears game, Caleb Williams opener. So we're really excited to do that. Should have a good weekend. The weather's starting to turn here, so fall is here. The NFL season's here. It's a really exciting time. So thank you guys for watching, and most importantly, good luck with your bets.